Hello and welcome to Edison TV. I'm Jyoti Prakash, Director of Healthcare at Edison. Today, I'm joined by Mads Bjerregaard, Chief Business Officer at SynAct Pharma, to discuss the recently announced results from the Phase IIb ADVANCE trial of resomelagon in rheumatoid arthritis. Welcome, Mads.
Well, thank you very much.
So, Mads, the ADVANCE trial has generated several encouraging efficacy and biomarker signals, in particular related to ACR20. However, statistical significance on the primary DAS28 CRP endpoint was not achieved. So, how do you interpret the overall data set, and what do you see as the key takeaways for investors?
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, so we're actually very, very happy with the results from the ADVANCE study, and I think you point to the obvious highlight is that this study really gets demonstrates the effect of resomelagon on top of methotrexate in early rheumatoid arthritis, delivering results on ACR20 levels on par with what we've seen in past trials, but really also on the levels that you would expect when using more potent compounds like JAK inhibitors or even TNF blockers that reach kind of this 75 to 80% ACR20 scores after 12 weeks of therapy. And resomelagon does the same, so it reaches 76.4% after 12 weeks of therapy, which is equivalent to what we saw in earlier trials. This is very encouraging and obviously very much encouraging in terms of also the deepening of response in ACR50 scores reaching almost 40%, which is highly encouraging and a measure that will only improve the longer duration of therapy you have. So really setting ourselves up for a phase 3 design, which typically goes into these 24 weeks, 26-week studies. So that is super positive and really what we are building the case around in terms of both the business logic and moving forward with a phase 3 design. Then you point out to the primary endpoint on reduction in DAS28. We reach in this study, we actually reach a 2.0 reduction in DAS28, which is above what we saw in the subsets numbers of the EXPAND trial. But the difference here is that you also see in the control group on methotrexate alone had a very high response, or much higher than what we saw in the EXPAND trial. And it was so high that under the limitations of the sample size and how this study is scaled, it was not able to reach significance on that endpoint. There's a couple of explanations for that. We are obviously looking into the data right now, and a couple of explanations is that patients were a little bit more sick than in the EXPAND trial, and that has a positive effect on especially DAS28. Interestingly, is actually what we did in when looking at the subgroups, ACR EULAR subgroups 1 through 3, where 1 basically is the least sick patients in that subgroup. When we just focus on the more sick, so group 2 and 3, that increased the effect of seeing an ACR20 response, which tells us something about that resomelagon works really well when people are having a lot of inflammation and are in the sicker category, and which also coincide with how methotrexate works, that it probably works better with kind of the earlier stage. So DAS28, we unfortunately didn't meet the endpoint due to very high placebo score, but very, very nice on the ACR20 scores and subsequent the ACR50 scores, reaching just shy of 80 and 40% scores, which is fantastic.
Exactly. And indeed, I think the ACR 20 scores are quite encouraging. Upwards of 75 is, I think, a great score. But when we look beyond these headline data, what are some of the other aspects of the advanced trial which you believe are most important for investors to understand?
So I think that there are two things or three things that we really want to communicate based on this trial, and which I think is just reads loud and clear. One is the ACR response, and when that picks in, or when that picks up in the resomelagon group, and what that would go for in a phase 3 design moving forward. I think you see the ACR response really popping up in after week 8, so a little later than what you would expect from kind of JAK inhibitors and TNF blockers, which really speaks to that the full extent of the effect has not been reached within the 12 weeks, which is amazing because you get good results and that continue. So that bodes really well for a phase 3 design. Then safety, by all means, that is, we experience, or the study demonstrates a safety profile that we've also seen in previous trials, with really benign side effect profile, with very few transient GI effects, for example, and with absolutely no signs of immunosuppression. And I think the safety profile is really the key differentiator to a compound like this, because that enables us to use it very early on, which is how we position this. And then thirdly, I think very importantly is that we also see significant reduction in key inflammation markers like CRP, NLR, so neutrophil leukocyte radio, which is really a measure of systemic inflammation. And we see a significant reduction in those ratios. That tells us that the mechanism, or the pro-resolving mechanism of resomelagon, really works to reduce inflammation in this population. So that's not only interesting for what we're doing in rheumatoid arthritis, but really interesting how this mechanism can be broadened out to a lot of other inflammatory diseases. So we're really encouraged by those three facts: the kind of how we set out an ACR and how that goes into a phase 3 design, the safety profile, which is key, and then this aspect of reducing key inflammatory markers that could take this mechanism beyond RA.
Great. And I believe that the lack of overall immunosuppression, which you've seen, and the significant reduction in CRP rates, it's actually quite key to the positioning of resomelagon. So moving ahead, Mads, how do these results influence your plans for the future development of resomelagon, including discussions with the regulators and the design for a potential phase 3 trial?
Yeah. So the next steps that we're going to take based on these two trials, or the advanced study. So we have what we need in terms of logic and data to support what kind of dosing should we do, what kind of duration of therapy should we expect, and obviously arguing for how the safety profile works. So our next step is to go to plan for end of phase 2 meetings with FDA and EMEA. We will work with our advisors on phase 3 design based on this data, and really to move into the discussion with the authorities on the moving forward for development purpose. And then, as I usually say, it's our priority 1, 2, and 3 is really on finding right partners to work with in terms of focusing on development and commercialization. And that is definitely also kickstarting now with these results, because it really allows us, or any partner coming into this, it allows them to say, okay, we can move this into phase 3 with a profile that is pretty clear, and that is a trigger for us to engage. And we are heavily on that track, and will initiate that or continue that already next week at the Bio International meeting in San Diego, where we have a full calendar of events ahead of us.
Excellent, and we look forward to hearing more about that. And beyond ADVANCE, you also have another phase 2 trial ongoing, RESPIRE. So, are there any important read-throughs from the ADVANCE study for the ongoing RESPIRE study or SynAct's overall ambitions in acute inflammatory indications?
Yeah, so I think the best or the most important trigger here is really the reduction in the inflammation markers. That is key to understand what this pro-resolution mechanism does with acute inflammation. So it really, it's a very, very strong demonstration or evidence to suggest, this has a role in these other diseases that we're looking for. The RESPIRE trial is running, and we'll obviously have to see how this pans out, especially in the setting of acute inflammation with patients coming into hospital due to viral infections or respiratory viral infections. But the ADVANCE study with the results on the reduction in inflammation markers is highly encouraging, not only to the ongoing viral infection studies, but also a lot of other arthritis indications that we should be looking at, and a lot of other inflammatory instances that this product might actually work in.
That's great. And just to wrap up, how, from a business development perspective, how do you see these results affect SynAct strategic options? And what are some of the milestones which investors should be watching out for over the next 12 months?
Yeah. So from a business development point of view, I think the logic really is a sound business logic, meaning that you have to, in rheumatoid arthritis, you have to see an ACR 20 scores in the level that we see in this, above 75% in ACR score, translating into a more durable ACR 50 score. We already reached 40 or 39% in ACR 50 after 12 weeks, and there's no doubt that the full effect on ACR 20 is going to be reached beyond week 12. So really bodes well for a phase 3 design. So we think that for a durable ACR 50 and even ACR 70 response after 26 and 52 weeks is what we should do and demonstrate in a phase 3, and that speaks to how physicians are looking at why should they use this compound. And also when speaking to US payers, that's also the primary thing is how can you take this patient population and treat them and really avoid them for escalating into biologics use, because that's the big scare from a payer point of view. And I think what we are doing here is really setting ourselves on that path. And that's exactly the same path as any partner would look at from a business point of view. So the milestones based on that is obviously saying, how do we design a phase 3 program and how do we do that? We want to have a partner onboarded to, get into this discussion as fast as possible. I think that would be the most logical way of doing it. And then the development program will outline clinical milestones of that. I think we're going to present this data as well on major conferences with all the sub analysis and things that we take away from data like this. And there's in a data set like this will likely pop up with a lot of good insights along the way that will also fuel some of the investor interest. And then obviously RESPIRE study and also what we're doing on the dengue study is very interesting.
Excellent. And thank you, Mads, and congratulations on the advanced study results. For our viewers interested in learning more about SynAct Pharma, please visit edisongroup.com for ongoing coverage of the company. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.